Okay, so this may seem a bit odd that you're listening to me talk through the computer when I'm probably walking around behind you, but I wanted to take this time to talk about research and plagiarism because on Monday we're going to start our first research-based project. And so I want to make sure that you understand everything that research entails. And I'm going to start by talking about plagiarism because this is serious not only in research but in every academic aspect of your high school and after high school career. So let's get started. So the definition of plagiarism, it comes from the Latin word plagiarius, which means kidnapper. And basically it's literary theft. It ranges from taking ideas from others and passing them off as your own to outright copying without giving credit. Now, plagiarism may be intentional or accidental. Sometimes students aren't even aware that they are plagiarizing, so I want to clearly explain what it is now so that you don't make that mistake in the future. But either way, intentional or not, it's wrong and it is cheating, just as looking on another student's test and copying an answer is cheating. Most students know that blatant copying material from another source without giving credit to it is plagiarism, but did you know that using virtually anything that originated with someone else in any form and then is paraphrased, summarized, or changed into your own words without giving credit to the source is also plagiarism? Now, just to make it crystal clear, let's take a little self-test. Here is scenario 1. You forget to finish your homework, so you copy just one of the 20 discussion question answers assigned from a friend on the bus. Do you think that that is plagiarism? I hope that you do, because yes, it is still plagiarism. You are stealing someone else's ideas without giving them credit. Scenario number 2, you have to do a report on Mark Twain and you copy it from the encyclopedia. Well, this is obviously a no-brainer. It is plagiarism. I've actually had this happen quite a bit. You copy and paste portions of a book report you find on the internet. Now, teachers are not stupid, despite what a lot of people think, and we can tell you're writing from a published writer, even if it's like one of those websites where you pay to get an essay. We can typically tell your writing style, and we can tell when it's not your own. So I've caught many students doing this as well. What about this one? This one gets a little trickier when trying to determine if you plagiarize. Your older brother has an old paper on Poe's The Raven, and you rewrite it in your own words and turn it in. Now, honestly, this would probably be a lot harder to determine, and likely the student would get away with it, but it is still plagiarizing. It's still taking someone else's ideas and passing it as your own. I have a few more scenarios here. You have to explicate the poem metaphor, and you summarize an explication that you see in a library book and turn it in. Yep, we're seeing a trend here. All of these essentially are plagiarism. Now, I'm guilty of this too, and I was as a student sometimes, but a lot of times if you're not sure what the answer is, you might use Google as a little help. Maybe if you're reading a book, you go to Spark Notes or something and you read and you summarize the analysis on Spark Notes. That technically is still plagiarism. It is not your original thought, so keep that in mind. Now, this one gets a little interesting. Your mom looks over your term paper on Emily Dickinson and changes a few paragraphs for you to make it sound better. Well, technically, it is still plagiarism. And again, very, very difficult for a teacher to prove this. But teachers are not out to get you like, oh, you plagiarize, you're awful, you're never going to amount to anything. That's not what we want. We want you to think for yourselves, and we want to give you opportunities to think for yourselves. So the reason that I'm spending so much time talking about plagiarism is to let you see that, we are encouraging you to come up with your own ideas here. This one is even pointless for me to even read. Of course, this is plagiarism. When you go to one of those term paper services on the internet and download a paper on Ernest Hemingway, you slap your name on the paper and turn it in. Students think that they're really tricky, but this is so easy to find out from teachers, so don't even try it, okay? I think I have two more scenarios. The first one being you are assigned the task of analyzing the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. You research the information at the library using some of the information, but you don't give credit to the sources. You put it all in your own words. Again, this is a little bit harder for teachers to figure out, but it is plagiarism still. You're summarizing someone else's work, and you don't give them credit. And then basically you read a book report on the internet, you summarize it, but you don't credit in your report. Same thing. All of these scenarios are plagiarism. So as a teacher, I often ask myself, well, why do they do this? Why do they want to cheat? And I realize that it's not always for malicious intent. First of all, plagiarizing is cheating. I realize that a lot of people have pressure to have a good grade, and I understand that. You might want to get into a good college. Maybe you see people cheat all the time, and I definitely see that in the world. And when people do cheat, maybe there's lack of serious penalties or consequences. We see this a lot in like college sports and professional sports like the NFL. Maybe some of the penalties don't seem too harsh, and therefore you might not feel that it's a very big deal. You might feel peer pressured on the other end. If somebody's like, hey, can I copy your homework? I didn't do it. You might feel pressured to give them your work. And then finally, I think most people are just lazy. So these are reasons why students plagiarize. And some more being you're looking for a quick way to complete an assignment. You don't have very good time management skills, which I don't know if really hardly any high schooler that does, even me sometimes. You might not feel that your work is adequate enough to turn in. And, you know, there are the few students who enjoy rule breaking. But it is very serious. Now, I like to tell people this, and this is totally true. It's not made up. But I'm going to tell you two stories. One is that the smartest kid that I graduated with, he was actually a year older than me. He got a full scholarship to Wake Forest. And his freshman year, I think he stayed up late doing things he probably wasn't supposed to be doing, and he forgot to do a writing assignment. And what he did was he looked something up on the internet, printed it off, put his name on it, and turned it in. Well, obviously the professor found out. So he was kicked out of college, like no questions asked. You know, mom and dad didn't even have a chance to come up. I mean, you cheat, you get kicked out of college. So it was very serious. He does not have a college degree. He's you know, he's not a sad story. He's not like living on the streets or anything, but he did lose a full ride to a really good college. And so that's my first little story to tell you. And the second one is, even on the high school level, you need to be careful about plagiarizing, especially if you don't see it as a big deal, because I know a lot of teachers who know if students cheat in their class, like on quizzes or assignments, and when it comes time to referring them to like Beta Club or National Honor Society, or maybe even writing them a recommendation to get into college, the teachers smile and say, sure, I'll be glad to write you a recommendation. And then they write that, yeah, this kid cheated throughout my whole class, so I don't know if this is the type of student you would like to accept in your program. So you do need to be a little careful when it comes to plagiarizing. So here are ways to avoid it, especially if you don't mean to. There are various ways to use information from a source and not be guilty of plagiarizing. The first one is use a direct quote, which we do in our constructed responses. Quote a source from another source, and then paraphrase the source, but also give credit to the source. So it says what doesn't have to be attributed to a source. So basically anything that comes from your brain, you don't have to cite. So an example, the relationship between a movie star and the studio he or she works with has changed quite a bit over the years. That's something that's like common knowledge. You don't need to credit that with anything. And for those of you who do think plagiarism isn't such a big deal, I want you to think about this. Would you want to be operated on a doctor who cheated his or her way through medical school? Would you feel comfortable on a bridge designed by an engineer who cheated his or her way through engineering school? And then I want to end with this quote. We can only be a person of integrity if we practice it every day. And I really like that quote because, no matter if you get away with it or not, at the end of the day, it's on your conscience. So, I think that that's a good quote to think about. Another misconception that students have is that if it's on the internet, it's public knowledge. Therefore, you don't have to cite it. And this is a false assumption. So, consequences for plagiarism. You'll receive a low or failing grade. For me personally, I'll just give you a 0. If it gets serious, like on big tests, and some teachers, might try to have you suspended, especially from a club. If you're a part of Beta Club or National Honor Society, or even a sports team, you could be suspended for a while. You do miss out on learning significant skills because you're not thinking for yourself. A lot of students do feel guilty eventually. Hopefully you would if you do that and get caught. And it does travel with the student. You build this reputation of being a cheater, and that's not always a good reputation to have. So when you are doing something formal, like a research paper, there are normally 2 places where you can tell the reader where you got the information. One is from a parenthetical citation, and you've already viewed this in the video that I had you watch after your quiz. So basically you're going to either quote the information or paraphrase the information, and then right after you use the information, you're going to tell the reader where it came from by putting the author's last name in a parenthesis, and then followed by the page number or paragraph number if it came from the internet, and then ending the parenthesis. If your source does not have an author, you would just put the title of the source, so like the title of the web page. And I will give you handouts that are very specific to this so you don't have to remember it. But here's a good example. It says, according to a recent poll, and then here's a quote from the New York Times, 83% of South Dakotans live over the age of 80. And so that's a direct quote, so I use my quotation marks, and then I attribute the source to New York Times. The second way to tell your reader where you found your information is through a bibliography or a works cited page at the end of the paper. This is where you list all the documentation for every source, and there is a specific style and way you do this, and again, I will give you sources and samples for you to use. It's really easy too because there's a website called EasyBib, which I think it was mentioned in the videos you just watched, where it will basically do it for you, so it's really not so bad. I know it says in this English 9 class, but English 10 class, and basically in every class, in college included, we're going to use the MLA style for citing sources. So the bottom line is that plagiarizing is dishonest. It can result in serious repercussions, and you no longer have the excuse that you just didn't know, because I feel like I was pretty clear and specific about what plagiarism is and what it looks like. So when in doubt, cite your sources, just like I did at the end of my PowerPoint. Okay, so to move on, next week, you're going to come up with a topic, and I will go over more specific details with you then. But assuming that you have all done research projects in the past, but basically on Monday, you have to ask yourself, where do I go from here? I have a topic, what should I do now? So let me just real quickly go over the research steps. So we're going to spend Monday doing grammar, and then Tuesday we're going to go back to the library and begin our research process. And so you're going to get on the computers, you might use the Upfront magazines, and whenever you find good information that you would like to use, I want you to take notes. And if it's on the internet, you can just copy and paste it into a Word document. You can handwrite notes on a sheet of paper. You can make note cards. And if you're using a print source, you can make copies. If I think Miss Dellinger might charge you to do that, but you can even take pictures with your phone. However, this is just note taking. This isn't actually using it as your own. But you're going to gather as much information as you can. And like it says here, it is okay to copy the information word for word, as long as you rephrase it or quote it and cite it in your paper. And if you find a bunch of good information in a source, make sure that you write down the bibliographical information from that source. Don't put it off and say, oh, I'll find this book later. Just go ahead and do it now, and that'll save you a lot of time in the future. So if you find a good website, copy the website, find all the necessary information, like if it has an author and date and all that. And like I said, this will make creating your MLA Works Cited page very easy. And here's just an example. Like if I'm doing a research project on the Beatles, I have the web address, the title, and then the year it was published. Now, it looks like this website does not have an author. So these are my notes that I copy and paste, and I'm not going to read them. But this would just be one example of how I might take notes and gather my information for my project. Now, after you have found all your information, go ahead and start writing. Do not copy the information onto your paper. Of course, like I said, you will receive a 0 even if one sentence has been copied. All right? And I've had people in the past where I found one sentence word for word and it wasn't in a quote and it wasn't cited and that person received a 0. So don't do it. Okay, you need to rephrase, paraphrase into your own words, and then cite the information in your paper. Now, rephrasing words does not mean that you change only 1 or 2 words. It means that you change the entire structure of the sentence into your own words. And like I said, it's definitely perfect to use direct quotes, but you don't want your entire paper to be full of direct quotes. And you don't want like a whole paragraph quoted. You just want maybe a few sentences, maybe a phrase. And again, you need to cite it. And so to avoid like quote overload in your paper, just don't use more than 1 or 2 quotes per paragraph. Now, whenever you write a fact in your paper and you need to cite it, you need to make a parenthetical citation, and the video hopefully before this showed you exactly how to do that. And again, hopefully you'll find my handouts helpful. But basically you put a parenthesis, you put the author's last name, space, and the page number, and if it's from a website without an author, you just put the title of the web page and you put an end parenthesis. So this is what it looks like. I got my source information, and then you can look at this paragraph here and see the in-text citations, meaning the parentheses that tell the author or the web page where it was found. And notice the period goes outside of the parenthesis. Now for magazines and books, you're going to paraphrase the information and put the author's last name and the page number. If you're using the internet, you would put the author's last name and the paragraph number. So an example, Smith, paragraph 2. If it does not have an author, I think this is the 3rd time I've said this, you'll write the title of the web page and then put the paragraph number. So if the title of the web page is the Fab 4, you would put the Fab 4, paragraph 2. And here is a sample of what an MLA Works Cited page looks like. So I went through that very quickly. I know it's been just about 20 minutes, so you might be thinking that wasn't very quickly, Miss Fear. But it is a lot of information. I hope you're not overwhelmed, because I am going to give you resources to refer to, and I will explain the research process more clearly and explicitly probably on Tuesday, because Monday we're doing grammar. So I'm going to upload this video to my website so you can refer back to it anytime if you need to. And again, you can use the handouts that I provide you. So hope you found that beneficial. And once everyone is finished with the quiz and watching the video, we can continue working on your group poster, which is due on Monday. All right.